I'm sure that you've all been blessed this week with the information that you've heard thus far, right? And the fact that you've been coming here night after night tells me that you are interested. For those of you who are joining us via live stream, we want to welcome you as well. And tonight you will not be disappointed because Barbara O'Neill has something special for us. That's why we're here. And so I invite you to sit back, and before she comes forward, we're going to have a special selection by a special person, Brother Scott. Brother Scott is here with us. Please come forward. He's going to give us a selection. And then after his selection, we will be blessed by Sister Barbara O'Neill. So sit back. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Indeed, it's a privilege again to be in God's house. Amen. Amen. As I sing this song, just please pray. Amen. Pray that the Lord will bless his people today. Amen. Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, even though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Though like a wanderer, the sun gone down, darkness be over me, my rest a stone, yet in my dreams I'll be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. He says, peace, peace, be still. Lift his hands, peace, be still. And like a child, my heart obeys him when he says, peace, be still. He says, peace, peace, be still. Lift his hands. Peace, be still. And like a child, my heart obeys him when he says, peace, be still. Hear his voice. Peace, be still. Peace be
Good evening, everyone. That was a very beautiful song, wasn't it? Everyone that has a heart should be here tonight. Because if you don't have heart problems, what I'm going to show you tonight is how you can prevent ever having heart problems. And if you do have heart problems, tonight you're going to learn how you can reverse arrhythmia, how you can reverse high blood pressure. Because God gave us a body that has an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And what makes the most sense to me is working with the healing powers of the body to bring about healing. I have seen many conquer heart arrhythmia. I have seen many conquer high blood pressure, no matter what the age is. This is a very important meeting because the number one killer in the world today, do you know what it is? It is heart disease. That's right. And Proverbs 4:23 states that we are to keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. Leviticus 17:11 states that the life of the flesh is in the blood. So when the Bible says keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life is the blood. And the heart pumps the blood. So we're going to be looking at a few things tonight. We're actually beginning looking at 3 things in this lecture. We're going to be looking at the heart, we're going to be looking at the blood, and we're going to be looking at the vessels that take this life all through the body. Because the issue with high blood pressure is not only the heart, but it is also the blood, and it is also the vessels that carry the blood. So what I'd like to begin looking at is the claim that heart disease is caused from cholesterol. Is that what we hear? That cholesterol causes heart disease. And when I worked in the operating theatre in my 20s, I worked in a psychiatric hospital. I was trained as a psychiatric nurse. And we had 2 operating theatres where we would perform basic surgical procedures on psychiatric patients, because post-op care is very different because their mind isn't working well. And we did a bypass one day. And I remember the artery that was taken out of the heart. When the operation was over, the surgeon took the artery and he put tweezers in and he pulled this white gristle out of the artery. What are we told that is? It is cholesterol. Is it cholesterol? Well, it is partly cholesterol. But I love the Proverbs 14 verse 6 that says, knowledge is easy to him that understand. I want to give you an understanding of what cholesterol is, because when you understand what cholesterol is, you start to know what its role in the body is, and then you start to understand whether it is the cause of heart disease. So let's look at cholesterol. When we looked at the liver, we looked at how the liver makes cholesterol. And 80% of the cholesterol that the liver makes is made from glucose. And 20% of the cholesterol that the liver makes is made from fat. I'm going to do our carbohydrate list and once again show you the science on fats. On Saturday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be presenting a meeting called Fantastic Fats. And I'm going to show you the truth on fats, because that's what I think you're interested in, and I certainly am interested in, because unfortunately many people make their decision on fear, whereas we should be making our decision on facts. So let's have a look at the carbohydrate list again. Cereal and bread. They probably always traditionally were called starches, pastries. This list will also be applicable in our next lecture where we look at diabetes. Also pasta. And when I say pastries, that takes in your croissants, your pies, your pasties, your donuts, so cakes, all of that. You call them cookies, we call them biscuits. So you see, when us Aussies see a sign in America that says biscuits and gravies, we don't understand that, because to us it's cookies and gravy. What you say is cookie, but I think biscuit here is like a scone, a bread roll, is that right? So pastries take in all of that, and also pizza is another carbohydrate. Rice, potatoes is a high carbohydrate food, and last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized sugar extracted from the sugarcane plant. And as we have looked at a couple of times, all of these carbohydrates break down in the gut to glucose. We had a closer look at that last night. And then it all goes straight to the liver, and the liver, number one, sends it to the cell to be burnt as fuel. So we're going to go into the cell again, and we're going to have a look at that, and we're going to also be referring to that and how it affects the way the heart functions, because the heart is made up of cells. The glucose goes in, it goes through a 20-step pathway, and the 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of this 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the 8-step pathway, often called the powerhouse because of its ability to deliver to us 36 units of energy. This 8-step pathway gives us this much energy because it uses oxygen, so it's called an aerobic pathway. The 20-step pathway does not use oxygen, so it's called an anaerobic pathway. So the first place that the liver sends the glucose is through those energy pathways. And then it stores some, because only so much can be put through. It's called glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. And that's what was used up this morning, as I'm sure you were vigorously doing your exercise early this morning after you've learned how powerful it is. And the third place that the liver sends the glucose, all the excess, is as fat. And on this high carbohydrate diet, Americans And Australians, do you know the Australians have overtaken Americans now? 63% of Australians are overweight or obese on this high carbohydrate diet. And I gave you this illustration the other day to show you that fat doesn't make you fat. What makes you fat? It's this high carbohydrate diet. I've just given you the basic science here, and remember what we're using in these lectures. We're using science, we're using common sense, we're using history, and we're using the Bible. And God is the author of all, and so they will all come together to support each other. And notice this obesity, overweight epidemic, it has only been around since the carbohydrates have been consumed the way they are today. I don't think anyone ever thought to or planned to eat this way. It's just convenience, is that right? And people are so busy today, and this is just quick, it's there. Now I lived in a rainforest, my children were raised there, and there was no corner shop. And so this was not fast food. If I wanted to make cereal, that took a little while. If I wanted to take bread, that took a while. If I wanted to make pastries, it's a bit of work. Pasta, a lot of work if you make that from scratch. Pizzas, rice has to be cooked, potatoes have to be cooked. So can you see, down on the farm 100 years ago, this was not the main food in the diet because it takes so much work. And my son-in-law went to Italy. He's an architect. He wanted to look at all their stone buildings to see how they're made. And he was there for 2 weeks. He cycled around. He said, "Mum, they don't eat pasta and pizza in the little villages in Italy." He said they eat minestrone soup. You see, pasta and pizza is like festive occasions, and I'm a mother, I'm a cook, and they take a lot of time. But a big minestrone soup on the side of the stove, that'll just cook away all morning, and then this person comes in and can take a big bowl and go back to work. As a cook, I know why the minestrone soups were used. Growing up, I'm a 5th generation Australian Scottish descent. So we had sausages or chops, mashed potato, frozen peas or beans every night. Except for Sunday, then Mum would cook roast lamb. And my husband grew up the same. He's Irish descent. And when I went to Scotland 2 years ago, that they eat the way I ate as a child. And so this roast lamb Mum would cook every Sunday took a bit of work. So in Italy, their pizza and their pasta is like the roast lamb cooked on a Sunday. So it's cooked for an event. So traditionally, not even in Italy did they live on pizza and pasta. So it interests me is how come people eat so much today? It's just there. It's just easy. It's just fast. But what I want to show you in this lecture and in the next lecture, how this is a big contributing factor to a lot of the diseases we're seeing today. We looked at cancer. We looked at how cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. So this high carbohydrate diet is feeding cancer cells. And you can see by what I've just shown you with cholesterol, 80% of the cholesterol our liver makes is made from glucose, 20% from fat. So it is more this type of diet that might be getting it up high. But what is high? First of all, let's have a look at what cholesterol is and what it does. So we've got 2 different types of cholesterol. We've got high density lipoprotein, HDL, and that's called the good guy. And the reason it's called the good guy because it is the carrier of excess cholesterol back to the liver where it's made. LDL, low density lipoprotein, it's called the bad guy, is that right? But God doesn't make anything bad. The body does not make bad things. What's its role? Its role is that of a repairer and a rebuilder. But it also has another role, and that is it delivers cholesterol to the brain, and the brain loves cholesterol. You see, 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein, and 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. Another reason why fat's important. Except for the brain cell. Around the brain cell, this is what the brain cell looks like, and we're going to have a look in detail at our brain on Saturday morning. These are little receiving stations. It's our electrical system. There's an arm coming out, and it has a fatty sheath around it. And these are the boutons. And so including that fatty sheath around the nerve cell, the membrane around the nerve cell is 70% fat. Wow, it's the fattiest organ in the body. You've heard of grey cells and white cells in our brain? Well, the grey's here and the white is here. It's the fattiest organ in the body, and it loves fat. Loves fat as fuel. Let me show you why. Glucose burns at 4 calories per gram, whereas fat, it burns at 9 calories per gram. And this information you will find in all weight loss books, in psychedelic colours, as the reason why if you want to lose weight, you've got to stop the fat. Because fat will give you more than twice the calories that glucose will give you. But what they don't understand is what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. So if you want a high energy food, what do you eat? Fat. No wonder the brain loves fat, because the brain cell consumes 15 times the glucose of any other cell, and it loves fat. Obviously, if you eat more units of energy than you burn, then they will store. Dr. Robert Atkins, that very famous doctor who was the first to officially show the dangers of the high-carb diet, he showed that you can have a 2.5 calorie a day diet, all carbohydrates, you can put on weight. And you can have a 2,500 calorie a day diet that is low carbs, high fibre, generous proteins, and we also looked at how the best proteins are your vegan proteins, that's your legumes, your nuts and seeds. So you can have a 2,500 calorie a day diet that is low carbs, high fibre, high protein, generous or healthy fats, and you can lose weight. Both 2,500 calorie a day. In fact, if anyone's still counting calories to lose weight, they're back with the dinosaurs. It's been proven that there's calories and there's calories. And what we've looked at a couple of times is what we should be eating is high fibre, generous proteins, and healthy fats. These are fats that come from the hand of the Creator. Your nuts, your seeds, your coconuts, your olive and your coconut oils. And I will show you on Saturday afternoon why those oils are so important. Let's have a look at the blood. Here is the artery. Because of its low density, LDL is always found on the edge. Because of its high density, HDL is found in the middle. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, in her book, Put Your Heart in Your Mouth, she spends her first 3 chapters of her book looking at all the things that damage the endothelium cells that line the arterial wall. Chemicals. I think she spends more than a chapter on the chemicals. I have always said we are introduced to 30,000 new chemicals every year. Oh, I'm wrong. It's now 100,000 chemicals. And be careful. In the supermarket, it's in the laundry detergent, it's in your cleaning products. They're some of the worst. In my laundry cupboard, you will find a bottle of white vinegar and you'll find some sodium bicarbonate powder and a scrubbing brush and the microfiber cloths and a bottle of eucalyptus oil or lavender oil to make it smell nice. We ladies like it smelling nice. No more chemical sprays. No more chemical hand sanitizers. No more chemicals. You've got some beautiful essential oils that you can use. And be careful, no $2 essential oils, okay? And when you get the very good quality ones, 1 drop. That is all you need. Go for the scents you like. In Australia, we've got a tree. It's a lemon myrtle tree. It's a beautiful scent. And so you can get lemon myrtle essential oil, but you can get eucalyptus oil here, can't you? That's nice. Your lavender essential oil. They last a long time because you only need 1 drop. And if you've got a very dirty bathroom, put a little pile of sodium bicarbonate there and pour the vinegar in it and it'll fizz up. Put the scrubbing brush in and scrub hard. That'll really clean things up. So if my grandchildren get into my laundry cupboard, there's nothing there that's going to kill them. You've got Trader Joe's, you've got Whole Foods, you've got Sprouts. And they all have biodegradable washing detergents, toothpastes, shampoos. Many of us are poisoning ourselves with what comes through in these things. Because if you have clothes on that have been washed in laundry detergent that has chemicals in it, when you get hot, and it was a hot day today, wasn't it? And your pores open, you are absorbing some of those chemicals that are still in the clothes from when they were washed. It's inevitable. And I showed you this morning, what's the best skin cream, ladies? Aloe vera. Open it up and put it all over your face. Very, very nourishing, and it's not putting any chemicals in. Be careful of the food. Still today in America and Australia, most crops, if they're not organic, are sprayed with Roundup. These chemicals get in and they get into the blood and they eat holes. They damage the little endothelium cells which are lining the arterial walls. They damage them. For a smoker, 4,000 chemicals in 1 cigarette. In fact, it's acknowledged how smoking can reduce the risk of heart disease. Mold. When you're breathing in mold, it's a toxic chemical. It can eat holes in the arterial wall. Mercury. We can be exposed to mercury in the silver fillings in the mouth. We can be exposed to mercury in the flu vaccines. We can be exposed to mercury in fish. And it damages the arterial wall. Okay, students, who's going to plug up the holes? LDL cholesterol, that's its role. Remember what it is? It's the repairer and the rebuilder. That's what God designed it to be. You see, these two are the road workers. They're the road workers for our network of capillaries all through the body. And the person does not realise the damaging effect of all of these things. And so what's happening in the arterial walls, it's building up and up and up and up and up. Something else is happening. The protein molecules, which we all have floating through the blood, when a person's eating a high carbohydrate diet, that is releasing a lot of glucose into the blood. So what happens is it connects with the protein molecules and becomes sticky. And it sticks in little spots along the arterial wall. So let's say we've got a very narrow spot here. Sometimes they dislodge and they get stuck. That is the #1 cause of heart disease. That's the #1 cause of cardiac arrests, of strokes if it's in the carotid arteries, it's a stroke. To say that cholesterol causes heart disease is like saying the fire trucks are causing the fires. It's like saying the ambulances are causing the accidents. Well, they must. They're always there. Have you noticed? I have 5 books in my library at home. The Great Cholesterol Con by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. He said for the first time, normal levels of a normal vital body substance is being called a disease. The Great Cholesterol Deception by Dr. Peter Dingle. The Great Cholesterol Lie by Dr. Dwight Lundell. He's another cardiovascular surgeon. He is British. The Great Cholesterol Myth by Johnny Bowden. The Great Cholesterol Hoax. We're running out of words. It is not cholesterol that is causing heart disease. And all of these doctors are speaking out. And the other book I mentioned to you by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride is Put Your Heart in Your Mouth. At the end of tonight's presentation, I will write all these up on the board so you can search them out. Because we need to get the facts. Yeah? I have another book. It's called Lipitor, Thief of Memory. And it was written by Dr. Dwayne. He's a medical doctor. He's an astronaut. And every year he has a blood test. And his doctor said, your cholesterol levels are a little high. I want you to go on Lipitor and get it down a little bit. So he took the Lipitor. What does Lipitor do? What do the cholesterol-lowering medications do? They block the pathway in the liver that the liver uses to make cholesterol. But that same pathway that the liver uses to make cholesterol, it also uses to make coenzyme Q10. And what's coenzyme Q10? That's your heart protective enzyme. So someone can go on cholesterol-lowering medication with the thought that they're preventing heart disease, but they can increase their risk because they've now lost coenzyme Q10. Let's go back to Dr. Dwayne. 6 weeks after he began taking Lipitor, his wife found him out in the garden. He was wandering around. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know where he was. In a lucid moment, he wondered if it was the Lipitor, so he stopped. Within a couple of weeks, his mind was clear. So he did not take that again. Went back to the doctor a year later to have his yearly blood test. Doc says, your cholesterol levels are a little bit high. I want you to go back on that Lipitor. And he says, I'm not going to go back on that. I nearly went mad on that. Doc said, this is very rare. So he agreed to go on a half dose. Why? Because of fear. He didn't want to die of a heart attack. No one wants to die of a heart attack. 6 weeks later, his wife found him out in the garden, didn't know who he was, didn't know who she was, didn't know where he was. Stopped the Lipitor immediately. He wrote his story and he contacted a social media site. And they said, wow, can we put this out there? He said, be my guest. Within a couple of hours, thousands of hits of people who said the same thing happened to them. Do you remember what the doctor said? This is rare. I don't think doctors lie, but I know the pharmaceutical companies lie to them. It's like this. I was reading about new cancer drug, 50% cure rate. And then when you look a little bit further, 2 people were tested and 1 died. Can you see how they play with the figures? Whew. Here are the side effects of cholesterol-lowering medication. And because I have what I have just told you, you will understand why. Alzheimer's, dementia, memory loss. How many people blame age? Have you read about dementia, memory loss, or Alzheimer's in the Bible? No. And how long did the old patriarchs live for? 800 years? No sign of dementia. God never designed that the human brain deteriorate. Who did? The enemy of souls. And the Bible says in Revelation 12, verse 7, it says, there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Praise God. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And verse 9 says, the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who has deceived the whole world. He was cast out to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. What does he do? Deceive. Can you see that he's deceived here? And remember what God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. He says, I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And he says in Isaiah 1:18, come, let's reason together. We've got to reason these things out. That's our sound mind. It's got to make sense. That's why I like the Proverbs 14 verse 6, knowledge is easy to him that understands. So what I wanted to show you is what cholesterol is, how it works in the blood, because if the cholesterol's building up in the blood, why is it building up in the blood? How many people blame age? I was giving this lecture in New Zealand last year. I gave it on a Monday night. On a Wednesday night, a couple came to see me. They were both in their mid-70s. The lady was very quiet, and the man spoke. He said, I just want to tell you that my wife and I came to hear your lecture on heart on Monday night. He said, we're about to have my wife committed to a psychiatric hospital. She's just been losing it. She's not remembering. She's struggling to function. She's been on cholesterol-lowering medication for 3 years. He said, we heard what you said, and we heard how you could stop it immediately, and we did. He said, I've got my wife back. They were both crying. He said, I've got my wife back. Wow. If you are on cholesterol-lowering medication and you stop, there will be a side effect. Your memory will return. If you've been on it for 10 years, you can stop it immediately. That is the only side effect. Praise God. Praise God. So one would say, well, what's the alternative? Why do you need an alternative? You need cholesterol. If the body's making a lot, we need to ask why. Is it because of chemicals you are exposed to in your home, in your laundry, in your food, that is breaking down those endothelium cells? The cholesterol is just doing what God designed that it to do. Can you see that? It's still the number one killer. So what are the authorities doing? Let me show you what they're doing. It started in about the 80s, is that right? Number one, they have decided that it's fat. So they're getting everyone on a fat-free diet, is that right? And you can go into the supermarket and you can see fat-free yogurt, fat-free milk. Well, what's that going to taste like? And so what do they do to make it taste any good? Add sugar. Now that sugar that they're adding is going to put a worse fat in your body than the fat that was actually in the milk. No, I'm not advocating cow's milk. Cow's milk is excellent milk for baby calves. Got that? People say, what milk do you drink? I say, I'm weaned. I have teeth and I eat food. So has the fat-free or the low-fat diet worked? Has heart disease dropped? No, not at all. So now they've introduced an alternative to butter, yeah? Margarine. I don't know about you, but I've never eaten margarine because I didn't think it tasted very nice. I grew up on butter, and so I never ate it. But a lot of people do eat it. Well, has that reduced heart disease? No. But what has risen since margarine has been eaten is cancer. Because margarine is a toxic fat. It's a man-made fat. It's similar in structure to plastic. So it's an alien to the human body, and it can damage. In other words, it can even worsen the damage on the endothelium cells. And it has not reduced heart disease. So what else have they done? Number 3, put everyone over the age of 50 on your cholesterol-lowering drugs. They're commonly called statin drugs, yeah? Well, has that reduced heart disease? No, not at all. So they've done something else, and that is lowered the levels. Now, I just thank God that 2 years ago, when I was in Alabama, a nutritionist and her husband, who was a scientist, did our program. They were very, very attracted to the lectures because they're scientific and they make sense. It's got to make sense. Isn't that true? And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work it out, do you? Too often, the technical information has been hidden. And yet we need a bit of technical to understand what's going on in our bodies. The lady was a nutritionist. She was 69. She was in very good working order. She'd been looking after her body, and she was still working. She said, I work for a doctor and I also work in a hospital. She said, I have the advantage of being trained in university 40 years ago. She said 40 years ago, if you had a cholesterol level of 300 and under, you were perfectly fine. Did everyone hear that? 300 and under is perfectly fine. And yet, if you have a cholesterol level of over 200, what are you told? You're going to go on cholesterol-lowering medication immediately, or you're going to have a heart attack. And no one wants to die of a heart attack. We had a pharmacist do our program. She was in her late 60s. She said, I'm really annoyed because recently a circular came around that anyone with a cholesterol level above 160 had to go on cholesterol-lowering medication. She said, I'm not against drugs. It's my job. I have my own private practice. I work in a hospital. But this annoys me because she said it's purely a money-making scheme. Because she said, if someone's on antibiotics, how long are they on it for? 1 week, hopefully. But if someone's on cholesterol-lowering medication, how long are they told they're on it for? Life. They're on it for life. The Framingham Heart Study. Have you heard of the Framingham Heart Study? It's a very famous study, little town of Framingham. It's been going for 30 years. It was set up to prove that cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease, but it has never proven that. People are having heart attacks with low cholesterol levels. But what it has proved is that if you have a high cholesterol level, you will never get Alzheimer's. Do I need to give you a moment's silence for that? Are you digesting that one? If that's hard to digest, I can understand it, because the great deceiver that has deceived the whole world has deceived in this area. Because what does the great deceiver want taken down? He wants taken down the part of your body where you communicate with God. Because if he can prevent you communicating with God, he can prevent you being saved. Is that right? Absolutely. And if someone has dementia and Alzheimer's, they lose their reason, their judgment, their intelligence. That's the very thing we use to communicate with God. On Saturday morning, I'll show you exactly where in the brain that happens. So these are all the steps that have been put into place to reduce heart disease. But it has not. It was the number one killer in the 80s. It's still the number one killer. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. It can be a scary thing, stopping your meds. And that's why, at the end of the program tonight, I will write the names of those books up on the board so you can get the medical facts and read it for yourself. So how can we reverse heart disease? How can we turn this around? Number one, low carbohydrate diet. Remember, the high carbs, the high sugar, they connect with the protein molecules and become sticky and start sticking on the walls. Low carbs, low sugars. So that is high fibre. So that's all your plant foods. And your plant foods do a wonderful job at releasing to you minerals and antioxidants, and it helps to keep that blood nice and thin. Do you remember yesterday I showed you how similar plant blood is to human blood, and it's particularly found in the dark green leafy vegetables. Generous proteins, and we looked at this the other day. We looked at Genesis 1:29, where God said, the seed, to you it shall be for meat. There's your whole grains, there's your legumes, your nuts and your seeds, and your healthy fats. For too long, the fats have been eliminated. Now, I'm not suggesting you drink a cup of olive oil a day. It's a concentrated food. You only need a little bit. But we do need those oils, because remember, 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. 70% of the membrane around the brain is fat. Number two, hydration. Hydration keeps the blood thin. And that's one other thing that can be stopped immediately is blood thinners. It had in the newspaper in Australia a suggestion that everyone over the age of 50 take half an aspirin a day. You've heard that? Yeah. We know what they're finding now. Aspirin causes stomach bleeds. It's one of the number one causes of stomach ulcers. It causes brain bleeds, and it causes eye bleeds. Brain bleeds contributing to Alzheimer's. So you put the aspirin and the statin drugs together, wow, there's a recipe for Alzheimer's and dementia. And I don't know about you, but I want to keep my brain clear and functioning. What God designed is that our brain gets smarter and wiser with age. Oh yeah. So your best blood thinners are water. Best blood thinners are water. Now, ideally, at least 8 glasses a day. That's 8 8-ounce glasses. And your blood is salty, and your tears are salty, and your sweat is salty. And for the body to access that access that water effectively, it needs the whole salt. And if someone has high blood pressure, what are they told? No salt. Well, the Bible talks about salt. In Matthew 5, verse 13, Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden underfoot of men." And I saw this when I was in Wisconsin a few weeks ago. They actually throw it on the road, underfoot of men, is that right, to melt the snow? How does the salt lose its savour? Well, seawater contains 92 minerals. Of those 92 minerals, 30% is sodium. Now, that one piece of information alone tells us how we should be having our sodium with all the other minerals. 50% is made up of chloride. And because sodium chloride are the first crystals formed, man scoops those crystals up, bleaches them white, puts aluminium with them so that they run freely. And you know what aluminium does to brain cells, don't you? It kills them. It's a contributor to Alzheimer's. So your table salt, and unfortunately sometimes they have the hide to call it sea salt because it came from the sea. So table salt has 2 minerals. And if you were to inject those 2 minerals straight into the veins, you would kill the person. We need all the other minerals to buff it. So the best salt is your Celtic salt. It has 82 minerals. Where are the other 10? Well, they're in such pico proportion, barely measurable, that it's inevitable that some are lost. But hey, 82 is a lot better than 2, isn't it? What about the Himalayan salt? The Himalayan salt contains 75, so it's fairly close. That Celtic salt contains 3 magnesium. It contains magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salts, magnesium bromide, and magnesium chloride. And this explains why Celtic salt is such a wet salt. But when you put that crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue, just a crystal, and then drink your water, when the salt's in your mouth, your mucous membranes are absorbing the minerals, takes the magnesium to the cell via the blood, then you drink your water and the magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body, is to have that little crystal of Celtic salt just before each glass of water. So that's 8 times a day. In his book, The Calcium Lie, Dr. Robert Thompson, he says, when you take that little crystal of Celtic salt before every glass of water, all you're doing is replacing the minerals you lost yesterday. You lose it when you cry, you laugh, you sweat, you urinate. We're constantly losing it, so we need to replace it. So when the Bible says if the salt has lost its savour, I'd like to suggest that table salt has lost its savour. It's lost all the other minerals. Yes, all it is good for is to throw on the road in the northern states to melt the ice. There is a book by a French doctor, Dr. Lilangri, and he has written his whole book on salt. He said, when we get someone with high blood pressure in France, he said, we give them Celtic salt because that brings back the balance. Because the table salt throws out the balance of minerals in and out of the cell. That is what causes the pressure. So some other blood thinners, cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper thins the blood. And cayenne pepper doesn't cause brain bleeds or eye bleeds or stomach bleeds. And if there is eye bleeds, stomach bleeds, or brain bleeds, it'll seal them and heal them. Remember Psalm 104 verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. Another great blood thinner is garlic. Now those who attended this morning's lecture on herbs, I had with me a little jar of Fireball. Remember Fireball? Onion, garlic, ginger, horseradish, cayenne pepper. And the people that tasted it, they're still alive. And they got nice warm stomachs. Another very good blood thinner is ginger. Put it in all your stir fries, put it in all your legume dishes, pour boiling water on the grated ginger, wonderful tea. Another great blood thinner is dark green leafy vegetables, your dark greens. In fact, if you're on warfarin, what are you told? You can't have dark greens or you'll get blood will get too thin. One man said, I've been back to the doctor, he tested my blood, he said, I've got to stop doing what I'm doing or my blood's going to get too thin. And I said to him, what about stopping the medication? You can have a bucket load of cayenne pepper, a bucket load of garlic, a bucket load of ginger, a bucket load of dark green leafy vegetables, and you still will not get your blood so thin that you'll bruise when you touch and how much does that happen if someone's on blood thinners? And if someone's on blood thinners and they're about to have an operation, they have to stop. Otherwise they'll bleed to death. They won't be able to stop the bleeding. Not with the herbs, they work with the body. Number 3, exercise. Exercise strengthens the heart muscle. And the heart muscle is like any other muscle in the body. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. When you stop using your muscles, what happens to them? They deteriorate. When I was 49 and my daughter was 19, she asked me to do a skydive with her for her birthday, and I did. I love flying. And I didn't land quite right. And I was on crutches for 7 weeks. And I would lay on my back and exercise with my legs. But do you know what I found after 7 weeks? The calf muscle that I wasn't standing on was half an inch smaller than my other calf muscle. How quickly the muscles deteriorate when you are not using them. And muscle knows no age. So whether you're 9 or 90, you can have strong muscles. Now the exercise that is particularly helpful with reversing disease is the high intensity interval training. As the name implies, they are intervals of high intensity. So what's high intensity? High intensity would be, you don't seem to have many hills here, so you can't walk fast up a hill. Or running, you can't run. Exercise bike, most of the research on the high intensity interval training has been done on an exercise bike. So for people who are a little bit unstable on their feet, they can hold on. And they can go very, very fast, and then they can do their recovery. How long is the high intensity for? 30 seconds. And if you think 30 seconds isn't very long, try it. When I'm running fast and I get to 20 seconds, my body says, that'll do. When I get to 25 seconds, my body says, this is getting ridiculous. When I get to 30 seconds, if I didn't count, I wouldn't go to 30. So if you can't run, then climb a mountain, not many mountains around Florida, swimming fast, or exercise bike is probably one of the easiest, or rebounding, you know, the little mini trampolines. If you leap high on that or jog very fast on your rebounder, you will get high intensity push-ups, crunches, sit-ups. Can't quite do sit-ups, just do crunches. You know, all crunches are is lifting the head. That's all crunches are. Easy. Anyone can do them. Recovery, about 90 seconds. What's recovery? What the researchers found is even though you feel like sitting down and getting your breath, the best recovery time is if you move a little bit. So the recovery time might be just slight moving. It might be just doing some stretches, going down, maybe a little bit touching the ground, just something light. If you're on the exercise bike, it'll just be pedaling slowly. If you're on the rebounder, it might be just, they call that the health bounce. So it's just something light, and that is usually done for a cycle of 6. So what's the maths on that? Well, we'll be generous. That's about 15 minutes. How many hours in a day? You got 24 hours in a day. If you say you don't have time to do this, You need to seriously sit down and assess, what are you doing with your time? How much time do you spend on technology? How much time do you spend in front of the television? How much? Yeah? That's the challenge. In fact, we cannot afford not to do it. We are training for something more important than the Olympic Games. We're training for life. God's work is suffering because the saints are sick. And they shouldn't be sick. So you've got to find out how you can fit it into your day. And I read this in a little book called Counsels on Health. The author said, in a short time you will so realize the benefits of pure air and exercise you would not live without these. So no matter where I am, no matter what I am doing, I'm doing that. I find some way to fit it in. I find the rebounder very easy because rain, hail or shine, or it's too hot in Florida, you can do it in your lounge room. And if you've got kids, you might have to fight them for it. I've come to the conclusion that people get old because they stop jumping. So the rebounder is a very easy type of exercise. You can do it in your lounge room. You just got to find out how to fit it in. And I find that you must make an appointment with yourself or it won't happen. So my habit is this. I wake at 5. I walk at 6. At home I dive in the mountain stream after I've walked. It's so wonderful. I'm back in the house by 6:30 and we're eating at 7. That's my habit at home. We are getting home a little bit later probably than we usually do because of these meetings. And then it's winding down to go to sleep. So we're usually asleep by 10:15. And we're sleeping in a bit, which I never usually do. But we've just come from Alabama and your 8 is their 6. So I'm still adjusting a little bit to those times. But praise God, I was able to get out and do my high intensity this morning. The other mornings I just do crunches and push-ups to just do a little bit every day. Get the body strong, get it fit. You will be so happy that you do. And what that does is it strengthens the heart. No one has ever had a heart attack and died doing the high intensity interval training. And how many people are scared of it? But many have dropped over dead from doing 5K jogs. I don't know about you, but I don't have an hour to do a 5K jog, but I've got 15 minutes. That's all you need. And you must get this high intensity to get that heart strong. Could be running up and down stairs, push-ups, exercise bike. You just got to find out what works. But if you want to reverse heart disease, exercise is essential. One more thing with the salt. It's got 3 magnesiums. Magnesium relaxes the heart at rest. Another reason why it's so important for high blood pressure. Number 4, God has given us a herb called the hawthorn berry. And the hawthorn berry strengthens the heart. If the blood pressure is too low, it'll bring it up. If it's too high, it'll bring it down. Do you remember what herbs do? They work with the needs of the body. Number 5, stop. There are some things that must stop if you're looking for conquering the heart. One is caffeine. It's the number 1 cause of heart arrhythmia, is caffeine. And if you're used to having 3 coffees a day, my suggestion is start having 3 half cups of coffee a day, then 3 quarter cups of coffee a day. Now you've got coffee substitutes called Romo, is it? Cafex, things like this. Or you can make a cup of coffee and have half a teaspoon of coffee and half a teaspoon of Cafex or Romo. And you will not get bad headaches, but you can slowly ease off at doing that. And by the end of the week, you've eased the coffee back. Maybe half a teaspoon the first day, 1/3 of a teaspoon the next day, 1/4 of a teaspoon, and little by little you can ease off the coffee. One of the other causes for heart arrhythmia is wheat. You see, it was hybridized in the 50s, and in my next lecture on diabetes I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail, and then tomorrow night when I look at the acid alkaline I'm going to go into it again in detail. But basically it was hybridized. It's created a starch structure and a protein structure that is very difficult for the body to digest, and because of that the body reacts by getting that heart rate up to the point of arrhythmias. So there are two things that must stop if you want the heart to be functioning properly. The hawthorn berry is such an amazing herb, it can actually get the heart rate back to normality. You can take it as a tea, or you can take it as a supplement in a tablet form. For someone coming off high blood pressure, they can even take probably about 4,000 milligrams a day. It's very, very safe. No problem at all. And it is so safe it can be used in conjunction with medication. My suggestion is, if you are on medication for high blood pressure, that you implement all of this. Go on the hawthorn berry, be taking the cayenne pepper, and then as your heart rate starts to settle and as your blood pressure starts to come down, which it will as you implement this, because an automatic side effect of all this is weight loss. And when the excess weight goes, you will find that that eases the pressure on the heart. The other thing that helps with all that, we've already got a 5, so we're going over to 6, is 2 meals a day. And ideally, the 2 meals a day, some retirees will have 9 and 3. There's their meals. Some people will have 8 and 2. You just got to work out what works for you. So that's your time-restricted eating. 2 meals. Let's say 8 and 2. Before we have our break, let me give you a story to illustrate this. His name was Henry. He was a retired High Court judge. He was 68. He was a little overweight and came to our retreat for a week. He was on 6 medications: blood pressure, blood thinning, blood cholesterol, blood sugar, for gout, and for stomach ulcers. I said to Henry, "Are you interested in stopping any of your medication?" He said, "No, thank you very much. I'm very happy with my medication." I always respect everyone's choice. As we went through the lectures, he said, "Very interesting." I also had him on hawthorn berry while he was there. He learned a lot of things at our retreat. He took hawthorn berries home with him because we had them dried. He rang me 4 months later. He said, "Barbara, I'd like to come and visit you. I'd like some more hawthorn berries." When I opened the door, I could not recognise Henry. He had lost 20 kilo, what's that, 4 pound, 40 pound in 4 months. I said, "Henry, looking good?" He said, "Yes, I can do my coat up now." He said, "Sit down, I have some stories for you." He said, "I went to my doctor last week and he took my blood pressure and he immediately got up and went to walk out of the room." And Henry said, "What are you doing?" He said, "The machine's broken." Henry said, "Why do you say the machine's broken?" He said, "Well, your blood pressure is 180 on 90. Now that's on medication." He said, "This machine says it's 120 on 78. Henry said, "That's my blood pressure now." The doctor took him off his medication because if he didn't, he would go too low. He said, "He took me off cholesterol because my cholesterol levels are down." He said, "He took me off my blood thinning medication because my blood thinning is perfect." He took me off my blood pressure medication because it's perfect. He said, "I have no more gout and I have no more stomach ulcers." He is off all his medication. This is a very interesting story because what did he choose? He chose not to go off. What did he do though? He implemented this. He said, "And I don't need my knee replacement operation now because my knees are happy." Knees don't like a lot of weight. I said, "Tell me about your exercise program, Henry, because he would not have had those results without exercise. He said, I find I can walk another block every week. So as the weight loses, as the heart gets stronger, the muscles, the body, the bones get stronger, he can go further for less effort in less time. I said, tell me what you're eating, Henry. He said, I have a spaghetti bowl at breakfast with chopped up fruit. He said some whole grain cereal, sometimes quinoa, sometimes buckwheat, sometimes millet, coconut cream. Did everyone hear that? And he's lost 40 pounds. It's not the fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. And chia seed and ground flax and a slice of sourdough spelt toast with avocado and tomato. That's not a light meal, is it? He said, I don't eat again till lunchtime. He said, then I have a salad. I have some steamed vegetables or stir-fried. He said, I have some form of protein. He said, because I'm a bachelor, I'll make up black-eyed beans or I'll make something and it'll do me a few days. And sometimes I'll have another slice of sourdough toast with avocado and tomato. And he said, and I do not eat again till breakfast. Wow, that's not a light diet. You wouldn't even call that a weight loss diet, would you? And yet, he's lost 40 pounds in 4 months, 20 kilos in 4 months. And he's off all his medication. In fact, he was talking about going back to the bench. What an incredible story. Some people choose to stop their meds. Some people choose to change their lifestyle, then stop their meds. I leave it up to the person. I have some people come and they're on such a low dose and their blood pressure's quite good that they choose to stop. But it is a very good idea to implement the lifestyle first. And much depends on how long you've been on the meds and ease off those. As I said, the blood thinning and the cholesterol can safely be eliminated immediately. So please, keep the heart with all diligence. And this is how you can do that. For out of it are the issues of life. So this not only strengthens the heart, this also strengthens the arterial walls and keeps the blood nice and thin. And we have seen many conquer their high blood pressure and their heart arrhythmia by implementing these simple principles. So please have a break. It is 8:10 and we will come back in 10 minutes and we're going to look at how you can conquer diabetes.
Okay, for those of you who were here last night, we started to show you some slide presentations of our health fair last year. As you know, we're going to be having a big community health fair on Sunday from 11 to 4. So we're going to show the other half of the presentation so that you can see what the health fair is all about, hoping that you can come out and bring your neighbors, bring your friends along with you, okay? Thanks.
came out here. I got some good food. I got the iron juice, the carrot juice. It's fabulous. I got a massage. Definitely worth it, and I appreciate everyone who put it on and make it a difference for us.
I enjoy every minute of it. It is so good, so good. And all the food is very good. And it's healthy. And me and my husband was passing by this morning and we saw the crowd. And we walked right in. And then we're having a great time today.
Welcome to Sunrise Health Fair. It's always fabulous. I look forward to it every year. It's most physical and spiritual benefits we get from this. It's a wonderful day.
I've been invited before, but it's my first time coming and I'm enjoying it. I'll definitely be back next year.
Likewise here, it's very good. I'm enjoying the food and you see the green juice. Man, I drink so much green juice, I don't know how am I going to get home.
Excellent, everything is tasty.
Yes.
Vegetarian, healthy. I mean, it's like 2 in 1, healthy and tasty all together. Having a wonderful day. Let us show you an idea.
Not chewing something.
I can go for it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a clean. Sometimes I wanted, I got it. Thank you.
It's my first time here at the Sunrise Health Fair, and I must say it was very interesting. In fact, I was able to see a lot of medical personnel. I was able to get the ground provisions. I was able to utilize most of the services here, and I must say it's a well-planned function, and I would like to be a part of it next year. So next year you guys can recruit me. What about that?
Welcome back, everyone. Now, I have a card here, and there's a whole heap of them out there, and this is where you can buy a lot of the herbs. It's called Island Juice Bar. And he has the hawthorn berry. He has herbs in many, many ways. So his card is on the table out there. What we're going to look at now is diabetes. In Australia, there are 300 diabetics diagnosed every day. Would it be so in America? Would you say that, I don't know whether I'd agree with that Ebola was a pandemic. I think we've forgotten what a pandemic is, but I think that diabetes is a pandemic. Would 300 new cases of diabetes being diagnosed every day, would you say that was a pandemic? Absolutely. And it really is very much a part of this high carbohydrate diet. Because with the high carbohydrate diet, see, here's your pancreas. And your pancreas, last night we looked at how the pancreas releases some enzymes into your gastrointestinal tract to break down your starch, to break down your fats, and to break down your protein. But the pancreas also releases two hormones straight into your blood. One is insulin. And insulin's the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell. And the other hormone is glucagon. So when blood glucose levels go too high, then the brain contacts the pancreas and says, quick, release insulin to get the blood glucose levels down. But high glucose demands high insulin. And so when you've got high glucose in the blood, an absolutely refined sugar can do it, but so can all of these when they're refined. As I said earlier in the week when we were looking at the liver, these foods aren't bad. It's only when they're overdone and refined. In fact, yesterday for lunch, we had chickpea, or you call it garbanzo, pasta. Have you seen that you can even buy pasta now that is made out of legumes? So that pasta is not going to release high glucose into the blood, but pasta made out of white or refined wheat certainly will. So when these are taken in and the blood glucose level goes up very high, producing high glucose, then the pancreas releases high insulin. What happens then is the blood glucose levels go too low. And when blood glucose levels go too low, a couple of things happen. The brain says to the pancreas, stop the insulin and release the glucagon. That's the hormone that gets the blood glucose levels up again. But at the same time, what does the person usually do when their blood glucose levels start to drop? They have more sugar. They have more sugar. Does that get it up? Oh, yes. But now too high. And now it goes up high again. So the brain says, oh no, stop the glucagon, release the insulin. Can you see what's happening here? Up, down, up, down. Now the first thing that happens, here's the cell. The first thing that happens, because remember insulin is the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell. So the first thing that happens when you've got this constant whiplash, high glucose and high insulin release, the cell develops insulin resistance. You've heard of that? Basically, the cell wall says, I'm sick of the sight of you. So it begins to resist insulin. So the blood glucose levels stay high. So the brain says to the pancreas, more insulin, because the glucose levels are still high. And the poor pancreas is saying, how can I give any more? And so eventually the pancreas just says, I'm done. And it stops producing insulin. So there is your diabetes. Diabetes mellitus means sugar in the urine. So when you have got insulin resistance and the glucose can't get into the cell, and when you've got the pancreas overworked and stopped producing the insulin, the body just has to spill the excess glucose out in the urine. So diabetes mellitus means sugar in the urine. If there's sugar in the urine, it's a clear sign that the body's not dealing with the glucose properly. So it's this high carbohydrate diet that is greatly influencing the diabetes we're seeing today. There was no diabetes on planet Earth until sugar was refined and used. But something else is happening. Something else is causing the epidemic. Now I have to stop for a minute because I think I've put this on wrong. Hopefully that's right. It's the wheat. You see, in the 1950s, Dr. Norman Bulag and his team of scientists in Mexico put the wheat through intensive crossbreeding, and that intensive crossbreeding they did to produce a higher yield of grain in the plant. But it couldn't keep growing this high because before the grain was ripe, the yield was so heavy, the stalk broke. And so they went back, more intensive crossbreeding, and you'll notice the wheat today only grows this high. And it's got a thick stem, that's so that it'll hold the heavy yield of grain. It was rushed through because of the starvation crisis, and no one objects to that. The starvation crisis in India, Africa, Mexico. But because it was rushed through, no safety studies were ever done to see the effect on the human being. And what that intensive crossbreeding did is it produced a starch with a higher effect on the blood sugar levels. Let me show you. It's called amylopectin A. Amylopectin A gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast, then you've got a corresponding drop. So that's your amylopectin A. It's the starch that was produced in the hybridization process. Let me give you something to compare it to. Amylopectin B. That's found in bananas and potatoes, and if you are familiar with the glycemic index of foods, amylopectin B gets it up fairly high. So that would be like this, not as high, not as fast, not as low. So there's your B. Something to compare, amylopectin C. Amylopectin C is found in garbanzos, lentils, lima beans, black-eyed peas, and that gives a nice steady rise and a nice steady drop. There's your C. And what does every cell in the body want? That nice, consistent delivery of fuel. And that's what the legumes do. I told you that I met a couple in Alabama at the health retreat 2 years ago. She was a nutritionist. She's the one that told me about cholesterol levels 300 and under being perfectly normal. Her husband was a scientist. He said, when I was in my 40s, I was told I was pre-diabetic and I was told to eat legumes every day. So I did. He said I ate garbanzos or lentils or black-eyed peas every day. He said, I never developed diabetes. Can you see why? Because those legumes give such a nice, steady, consistent delivery of fuel. Understanding this, you will not be surprised when I show you the effect on the glycemic index. Glycemic index is an index or a reading on how quickly the glucose in the food is released into the blood. So your baseline is 55. Sugar, it sits at 59. Now that's not a surprise, whether it's white or tan or brown. For a comparison, cherries. Cherries sit at 26. That's your cherries, blackberries, blueberries, all your berries are quite low. Grapefruit. Grapefruit sits at 25. So these fruits are excellent fruits for the diabetic because they give a low delivery of glucose. So that's light on the pancreas. Where does white bread, so we'll say white wheat. So this is white bread, white pasta, white cakes, white donuts made out of white flour. That sits at 69. Do you know what that means? A slice of white bread will get the blood sugar level up higher and quicker than a candy. And how many foods are these two combined? Isn't that your donuts, your cookies, your croissants? I'm glad you're sitting down because the next piece of information is shocking. Wholemeal, or you call it whole grain, is that right? Whole grain wheat. Whole grain wheat sits at 72. How could that be? Well, because the whole grain is not refined, it's got more amylopectin A in it, and it's the amylopectin A that gets that shoot in blood glucose levels. And what are diabetics told to eat? Whole grain? Is that right? One lady said to me, I do everything I'm told. I have whole grain bread. I have whole grain pasta. I have whole grain cereal. And she said, and every 6 months I go to the doctor and he puts me on more insulin. She said, I don't do what the lady down the road does. You know what she does? She has donuts, she has croissants, she has lollies. She said, I don't do that. She said, I'm so frustrated because I do everything they tell me and yet I'm getting worse. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. She said, I'm crying tears of frustration because I have been doing this for 2 years now and getting worse. She said, I'm crying tears of joy also because you have just solved the puzzle. It is the wheat. So why aren't diabetics told to stop the wheat? How much wheat does America grow? I'm sorry, but you have to go behind the scenes and look at the funding. So to conquer diabetes, the wheat must stop. Now, I have been in Whole Foods and Sprouts. They have gluten-free pastas. They have brown rice pastas. You can get gluten-free bread. I told you last night or was it yesterday morning, a website, and I'll give it to you again. And this is the sourdough gluten-free bread made with quinoa. And it is beautiful bread. And this young man, Tristan, it's just his family business, and he ships anywhere. At the health retreats I go to, they order it Monday, you get it in a couple of days, freeze it immediately. It's beautiful bread. It's the nicest gluten-free bread that I have tasted. You do have to be careful of gluten-free breads because sometimes gluten-free breads have potato flour in it and white rice and can get the blood sugar level up really high. But not so this bread. So I'll give you the website. It's www.simpleneeds. And that's .com. So that is a bread that you can use when conquering your blood pressure. It is a bread that you can eat when you're conquering your diabetes. It has quinoa, a lot of the flour's quinoa, which does not get the blood sugar level up very high. So you can eat bread. And this also shows one of the reasons why diabetes is out of control. Because of the bread, because of the whole wheat. Can you see that the hybridization process changed the starch structure? And it explains the pandemic of diabetes that we are seeing today. So to conquer diabetes, number one, there are some things that must stop. So the refined sugar must stop. Absolutely. And the wheat must stop. And the caffeine must stop because caffeine causes an insulin response. And you got to give that pancreas a break. One of the reasons that diabetes happens is because pancreases just get overworked. And how many here are made with wheat? It's the cereal, the bread, the pastries, the pasta, the pizza. And just about, I'd say all of those are a combination of the refined sugar and the wheat. And how many of these are consumed with a cup of coffee? In the book, The China Study, Dr. Colin Campbell, he shows that when a child has dairy milk in the first 2 years of life, it more than doubles their risk of developing type 1 diabetes. And how many children are put on the cow's milk formulas? Why is that? Why do they develop diabetes? When the gut cannot break down dairy, and it is estimated that 60% of the population can't handle dairy. When they can't handle dairy, there's molecules that get broken down that the body doesn't recognize. So it produces antibodies to deal with them. Now let's say the antibodies look like this, and they're designed to deal with these molecules because the gut cannot break down the milk properly. And let's say those molecules are shaped like this, so they come and basically eliminate them. But then it has been discovered that the beta cells in the pancreas are a very similar shape to those molecules broken down that aren't effectively broken down. So these antibodies come along and start wiping out the beta cells in the pancreas. That is quite well documented, that process. So the dairy must stop too. There's something else. To make white flour white, it is bleached. And it is bleached with a bleach called alloxan. And alloxan, they have found, kills the beta cells in the pancreas. These are the beta cells. And the beta cells are the cells that make insulin. So how many children in America have cereal, milk, and sugar for breakfast? There's a book that you can buy called Cereal Killer, and cereal is spelt like that. It's by Alan Watson. And he shows that in America, something like 90% of American children have cereal for breakfast. And he says by the age of 3, 1 in 3 American children are either overweight or obese. And he also looks at how every cereal contains sugar. And then he goes behind the scenes. Why is this so? Have you noticed how many ads on television are for cereal? And the children sees the ad on the television, and of course it's very attractive. The people are laughing. They're such good-looking, happy people. So what's the message? If you want to look good and be this happy, eat this. And so you go shopping with little Johnny down the aisle, and he sees the picture of the ad he saw on television, and what does he want? Yes, it's not a good idea ever to walk down the cereal aisle with children that watch television. And they know that if they make a fuss, they'll get it, because the adult doesn't want a fuss in the supermarket, do they? So if the child does that, there is a way out. You leave the trolley, you haven't paid for it, you take the child's hand and you start walking. You're stronger than them. They don't want to come, so they fall down on the ground. You give them the choice to get up, but they don't get up, so you just keep walking. And everyone's looking at you and you smile and you say, they like being dragged. Every now and then you stop and you give them the choice to get up again. Oh, they still want to be dragged, okay. Gets a bit hard when you get out to the gutter. And if you smile very sweetly and look, when people are looking, saying, they like it. And then when you get in the car, you put the child in the car, a bit hard to put the seatbelt on, they're making such a fuss. Never be rough, never be rough. And then you'll get home, and by the time they got home, They've settled down. And you say, sweetheart, if you have a performance like that again, you won't go shopping with me anymore. So you never get angry. There's just a consequence. Consequence to every action. I used to say to my children, we're going shopping now and I'm not going to buy you anything. Smile. Smile like an idiot. If there's a fuss, we will immediately leave. Smile, smile. You know what the smile says? I love you. Never get angry. And if you nip it in the bud like that, you won't get angry because it's all under control. Unfortunately, Alan Watson, he goes behind the scene. He said he finds that big cereal companies, big grain companies are going to court and defending their right to brainwash American children. Yeah. So, yeah. So isn't that interesting that the breakfast of the American children is actually a big contributing factor to their diabetes? I've also had people ring me and say that their child got diabetes after being vaccinated. Now, not every child that gets vaccinated gets diabetes, but it is one of the factors. I also find that when a couple are eating sugar and a lot of wheat and a lot of caffeine, they can weaken their pancreatic gene so that their child can be more prone to diabetes. Now, if the parents did not realize what they were doing, if the child is fed a meal that is low carbohydrate, high fiber, generous proteins and healthy fats, that child, even though it was born with a weakened pancreatic gene, it may never develop diabetes. That is the good news. The body has the ability to strengthen and heal. So there are some things that must stop. Number 2 is a high fiber diet. Now remember what this high fiber diet is? Lots of vegetables and all your whole grains. Also, generous proteins. Remember the scientist I told you about who had legumes every day? Michael and I eat legumes every day. What did we have for breakfast? For breakfast I had berries for breakfast with chia seed. I had some almonds. I had some spelt toast with olive oil, cayenne pepper, avocado and brown lentils on top. That was my breakfast. I do not get hungry for 5 to 6 hours. My usual lunch is salad, some baked. I'm married to an Irishman, so baked potatoes have to happen just about every day. And then another legume dish. There are some quite nice legume dishes in the back of my book. My book mostly has legume dishes because I find that that's an area most people do not know about, is how to make legumes nice. Don't just boil them, they'll be boring. You got to soak them. You got to rinse them. You got to cook them, rinse them again, and then put them with a delicious sauce. The sauce I used yesterday, and this recipe is in my book, I blended cashews and milk to a cream with a few cloves of garlic. I'd cooked onion in a pan and some asparagus. I poured that cashew milk in. It went nice and thick. And then I put the chickpea pasta in on that. Delicious. Very nice. Food should be good. And then another day I might do a rich tomato sauce. There's a whole lot of things that you can do. So the other protein is found in your nuts and your seeds and your healthy fats. And just before I serve, I put a nice helping of olive oil in it. That makes it delicious. So your fats are your nuts and your seeds, your coconut oils, your olive oils. Your first cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil is your best. What you'll also find is that these are all low GI foods. High GI foods are things like bananas. So instead of bananas, have berries. Instead of potatoes, have sweet potatoes. Doesn't mean you don't have any potato. You just have maybe half a potato and some sweet potato. instead of 2 potatoes. You just change your ratio like that. Keep well hydrated. Hydration helps to balance the blood sugar levels out. And again, that's 8 glasses a day. And remember that little bit of salt before each glass, that Celtic salt. Before each glass. That helps to get the water inside the cell. Number 4, early nights. How many hours? 8. 8 hours every night. 8 hours a night. If you're not used to 8 hours a night, you can change and you can train your body into 8 hours a night. If you go to bed at 10 and wake up at 3 and can't sleep, you can lie there and just be very, very thankful that you can't sleep. What else can you do? And if you get annoyed, you won't get back to sleep, will you? And the Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, in everything give thanks. So you lie there and you say, thank you, Father in heaven, that I can't sleep. Now I can talk to you. When you relax, you are more likely to go back to sleep. If I can't sleep, I will just go over all my memory verses. Some people hum hymns. If you still can't sleep after half an hour, you might put a soft light on and read a book. And don't get an exciting book. But definitely don't put all the lights on. And definitely don't check your phone. Well, you can't anyway because it's not in your room anymore, is it? Is it? So your iPad, your iPhone, out of your bedroom. No technology in the bedroom. And you can train yourself back to sleep. And eventually you can train your body back into 8 hours sleep a night. It's in those hours that your batteries are recharged. It's in those hours that your cleansing of the brain happens. It's in those hours that a filing system happens, taking the short-range storage unit into the long-range storage units. And that's what your dreaming is. It's your dreaming is your body filing all the information that happened through the day. So the early nights are important. Exercise. Sounds like we're going through those 8 laws again, doesn't it? Now, the reason exercise is so important with diabetes, and especially the high-intensity interval training. So remember we looked at insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is the membrane around the cell is resisting insulin because it's so sick of being overworked with the insulin because there is so much glucose. When you do the high intensity interval training, and ideally in the morning, do you remember you've got your energy cycles and you've got your glycogen stores? So you've got the 20-step pathway, you've got the 8-step pathway. Remember the 8-step pathway gives us 36 units of energy, the 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. Then your glycogen stores, then your fat stores. So when you do your high intensity interval training in the morning, by the end of the first set of high intensity, your 20-step speeds up and your 8-step speeds up, and that's not a surprise. But that 20-step pathway is very fast, whereas the 8-step is quite slow. And while you're sitting here right now in front of me, those pathways are feeding quite nicely into each other. But when you're running for your life, or rebounding for your life, or cycling for your life, or push-ups, crunches, whatever your high intensity is, that is going so much faster now that more of the pyruvate, remember that chemical form of glucose? More pyruvate is being made than can be fed into the 8-step pathway. And so what your body does now is it stores the excess pyruvate as lactic acid. You've heard of lactic acid? In recovery time, because remember with your high intensity, you got periods of high intensity, periods of recovery, and the recovery is just cycling slowly or just stretching a little bit. When you're in recovery, your liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate. Now the good news of that is it's mopping up your lactic acid, and you'll see tomorrow when we look at your acid-alkaline balance in the body that disease thrives in an acid environment. So when you're doing your recovery time, the liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate. So it prevents buildup of lactic acid. But when you're in recovery time, because of this process, your cells are burning just as much fuel as when you're running for your life or cycling for your life. Isn't that good news? And this explains why they have found this the most powerful form of exercise today. You'll find that all the top athletes train with the high intensity interval training. And this is one of the reasons why. Now we're getting to our second and third set of high intensity interval training, because remember you've got 6 sessions of your 30 seconds high intensity. Your glycogen stores are getting plucked. And remember, these glycogen stores are quick release glucose stores already in your muscle cell, and as soon as you start moving, they get plucked and thread through the energy cycles. Plucked, thread through the energy cycles. By the 4th set of high intensity, we've run out of glycogen stores. So now the brain releases the human growth hormone, which causes the fat cells to start releasing their stores of glucose, because isn't that what fat is? It starts releasing, I call that the basement stores, whereas this is the kitchen cupboards. You run out of kitchen cupboards, you've got to go to the basement. That's what my daughter does in Wisconsin. The kitchen cupboards are running out, she sends the kids down to the basement. So when you're running out of kitchen cupboard stores, the brain releases the human growth hormone, which starts releasing the fat stores. It also causes the body to stop burning glucose as fuel and become a fat burner. What a wonderful process. All because of the high intensity interval training. Something else is happening. Our cells are needing more fuel. And so what they do now is they develop extra insulin receptor sites to get more glucose into that cell. Insulin resistance can be turned around within a week. All you have to do is get those carbs down, stop this, implement this, begin your high intensity interval training, and you can actually flip or change your metabolic rate, the way that your body runs at. What an amazing body we live in. And at the same time, before you exercise, make sure you're well hydrated. And you can just turn that around. No wonder this high intensity interval training has become so popular. Yes, with the athletes, but with each one of us. And remember, for those who weren't here for the first lecture, 30 seconds high intensity, a recovery time of 90 seconds, yep, for a cycle of 6. What's that? That's about 15 minutes. That's it. Has a dramatic change in the way our body runs, to the point that it can turn diabetes around. So I need to give you the story of Bobby to illustrate. Bobby came to our retreat 2 years ago in Alabama. He was 62. His doctors had just told him they could do no more for him. He said, I've spent $1 million on my health in the last 10 years. He was the CEO of some big companies. They could do no more for him. They tried one more thing. They'd taken the lymph nodes out of his groin. As a last resort, trying to find out why he had diabetes, I can't understand that, and I'm so sorry they did that. So when he came to our retreat, he was in a wheelchair because the flying had caused his legs to swell, because he had no lymph nodes to ease that lymph fluid out. So he came to us in a wheelchair. He was on 90 units of insulin a day. He was a type 1 diabetic. He was also on blood pressure. He was also on blood thinning. He was also on cholesterol-lowering medication. He just spent $800 on some expensive bandages for his legs. I said, you won't need those. He said, oh. I said, I want you to rebound for 1 minute every hour. Remember that rebounding? Dispersing that lymphatic fluid? I also got him to go barefoot on the grass to massage the bottom of his feet. He was scratching his head with this strange treatment. He'd been to some of the best specialists and the best doctors in the land. He was with us for 2 weeks. He said to me, anything you tell me to do, I will do. And I knew that he would, and he did. He'd sit next to me every meal and he'd say, is my meal right? Have I got it right? And I'd say, 2 potatoes, just do 1. Here, I'll have that other potato. He did this exactly. At the end of 2 weeks, he was on 10 units of insulin a day. Type 1 diabetic. He emailed me 3 months later. He said, I am off all my insulin. He said, I am off all my medication. My blood sugar's normal, my blood pressure's normal, my blood cholesterol is normal, everything is normal. He said, in this 3 months, he said, I've lost 20 pounds. He said, I am swimming 30 laps a day. I'm cycling 10 miles a day. And he said, I'm rebounding every day. Now that's all the exercise he will ever be able to do because he lost his lymph nodes. And if he walks or runs, too much pressure is put on his legs. He said, when I went home, he's 62, his wife's 42. She said, this is your baby, mate. I like my parties and my champagne and my croissants. After 3 months, she's looking at her husband. She hasn't seen him look like this for a long time. In fact, he's gone back to full-time work. He thought he had to retire early. The last email I got, he said to me, 45 pound now. And he said, my wife's interested. Do you know that's the most powerful thing you can do? Yeah? Is show what it can do in your life. And you know what else happens? The mood changes. People become happier people. They become calmer. Because these foods here, getting the blood sugar level up high, what's that? They're turned up like tops. What happens when it crashes? They're cranky. They're going to bite your head off at every step. Your cells, particularly your brain cells, need a consistent, sure delivery of fuel. And that's what this food will do. With a well-hydrated body, which helps to release that fuel at the right time, and with the high-intensity interval training, as I showed in the last lecture, it can change your metabolic rate so that your body now is running well. And ideally, when you sit to eat, the fuel that you eat is just going to build up the glycogen stores that you lost in exercise, and they don't even go over. Scarf's running away. It doesn't even go over to your fat cells. Isn't that what you want? And when you're eating your 2 meals a day, breakfast like a king, lunch like a pauper, the food doesn't even go over to that. You're exercising, using up your glycogen stores. When you eat your meal, it's just replacing your glycogen stores. And so the weight just automatically comes off. So there's no need to give a presentation on weight loss because you can see that it all automatically will do that. Can you see that the principles to conquer diabetes are very simple to the principles to conquer high blood pressure and heart arrhythmia? It's very, very similar. And that's what Bobby found. He implemented this and he conquered everything. And I have found that. And I didn't write this down, but we'll put it up here for number 6. Breakfast, like a king. Lunch, like a queen. And supper, like a pauper. And sometimes paupers don't eat. So if supper is taken, it should be something light, like soup. Or a protein smoothie. But again, always keeping it low GI. Are there any questions as we close? Yes? Have I covered anything on sickle cell? We have touched on it in a couple of lectures. There has been some questions. I find that when people implement that, sickle cell anemia can begin to balance out. That's right. When the sun goes down, your body knows. Even though we've got lights on, the body knows outside it is dark. And that's why if you have anything to eat, it should be several hours before you go to bed, and it should be very, very light. Because that meal that you digest very well at breakfast, you don't digest at well in the evening. Because the body knows that everything's slowing down, ready for sleep. Yes? Does the pancreas recover? Overworked pancreases, they do recover. It's like Bobby. He was on 90 units of insulin a day. And the reason he had to keep reducing his insulin is because his pancreas revived. And I've seen it again and again. One young man said, the doctor said my pancreas is dead. I said, is it gangrene? What's dead? You can't get half dead or nearly dead. It's either dead or it isn't. I said, if there's blood going through, it can revive. And this young man was with us for 4 weeks. He was on 90 units of insulin a day, and after 4 weeks, he was on 10 units of insulin. And one morning he got up. I have to give you the Australian levels because they're the ones I know. So in Australia, a blood glucose level should be about 6.5. He got up one morning and his blood glucose levels were 3. Now that's nearly passing out. He had a big drink of water, then he got dressed, had another drink of water, and then he ran up and down hills doing the high intensity, came back, his blood glucose levels were 9 and he'd had nothing to eat. So where'd that come from? Because he exercised and he was well hydrated, it released his glycogen stores. I think glycogen is the diabetic's best kept secret. Yes? Everything light. No? I think you need to eat a hearty meal, especially when you're just eating 2 meals a day. You definitely don't overeat, But there's 3 things that keep the food in the stomach longer. That's fibre, protein and fat. So these foods are necessary for you to be able to go the distance between meals. Most people get hungry on a high carbohydrate diet because a high carbohydrate diet is often lacking fibre, protein and fat. Yes? If the body retains water. If the body retains water, it's usually a sign that they're dehydrated. Because in dehydration, the body sends to hold onto the water. If a person is swelling, and this morning I gave the story of a lady who was about to go on dialysis and came to our retreat and did not need to go on dialysis, and her legs were swollen. She had to sip water very, very slowly. She could not have a whole lot of water at once. She started to have some salts, and she went on the couch grass, the celery, the corn silk tea. She went on a whole lot of kidney teas, and her legs came down. If someone's got compromised kidneys, they must not drink a whole lot of water at once. It's got to be little by little by little. Yes?
If you work night shift, do you come home in the morning and eat like a king before you go to bed?
No. If you eat night duty, you're far better to have your to come home and not eat, go to bed, and then wake up in the middle of the day and have a big meal then, and maybe another big meal before you go to work. And if halfway through your night duty you're hungry, then have a smoothie. You have to play with that a little. So thank you for your attention. I'm a little bit over time now. Oh, there's one hand, I'll take that. You have a question? Do you have to eat every... No. If you eat a meal that is high in fibre, protein and fat, you do not get hungry for 5 or 6 hours. And so when people are getting hungry all the time, it's usually because they're not eating enough. They're eating food that does not have enough nutrients in it. And sometimes when people are hungry after a couple of hours of eating, it's often thirst. So the body doesn't often know the difference between hunger and thirst. So let us pray. Father, thank you so much again for this body. Thank you for our pancreas. Thank you for our heart. Thank you for the information on how to treat them, how to keep them in good working order. For our desire, Father, is that our bodies be stronger and healthier, that we may be effective servants for you. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.